Good afternoon. My name is Amol Nirgudkar. I'm the CEO of Patient Prism, and I have with me here on our webinar Dr. John Meis. He goes by Dr. John. Um, the most of the industry knows him as an international speaker, a two-time best-selling author on Amazon, and a dental consultant, and a dentist. All of them. He's pretty much done it all in this industry. He's a practicing dentist. He's built a large group practice. He was the president of one of the top 20 DSOs in the country. And today he leads two amazing companies, Spark Dental Network, which really helps medium-sized group practices create sustainable growth. And then the Team Training Institute, as many of you guys already know, helps practices improve productivity, profitability, and most importantly, peace of mind. Dr. John, welcome to our webinar.
Welcome, Amol. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm no longer practicing. I wish I could do it all, but I had to slow down on something, so I'm no longer practicing. But other than that, great introduction. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're in unprecedented times today. The coronavirus epidemic, or pandemic rather, has hit us out of nowhere. It's brought us out to our knees. We're all sitting at our homes, figuring out what's happening to us, how long will this continue, and what's obviously the direct impact. And some businesses may not be impacted as much. Obviously, everybody is, but dentistry is impacted directly because obviously ADA came with the recommendation that we recommend that only emergencies be served, and then some states came out and said no non-emergent dentistry. And so a lot of dentists are facing a situation where in the month of April, they may not have any revenue, or they may have only small amount of revenue. And to sustain your business with that kind of a revenue reduction, which cannot be planned for, is very, very difficult. So the title of our webinar today is Landlords, Lenders, and Vendors. It's a creative title that our VP of Marketing, Beth Gaddis, came up with, and really is to talk about the purpose of this webinar is to really ask you, yes, we've got to reduce our expenses. That's the number one thing, right? As our revenue goes down, our expenses have to come down. Not every expense can be reduced. You cannot fire every single person in your office. There's a core team that you have to maintain. Furloughs are happening, all that stuff. But sometimes you've got to go outside the box, right? And think about what can you do to reduce your fixed costs. And there are certain fixed costs associated with paying rent, paying your bank, or paying your vendors. So let me ask you, the first question is, number one, what am I going to do? How am I going to have enough money, right? That's the number one question, to survive this tsunami that just is hitting me out of nowhere.
So obviously, no one thought this was going to happen, at least in this time frame, right? And so dentists don't usually think of the term of burn rate, but businesses often do. When there's a business interruption, they think of burn rate, and that's how fast cash is going out. And dentists don't really even think that way usually, because our business is so steady and so stable that we don't have to deal with burn rate issues, but we do right now. So burn rate is how fast you're going through cash. And an interesting thing about dentistry and most small businesses is we use today's revenue to pay for yesterday's expenses. And today's expenses come from tomorrow's revenue, but there is no revenue today. There's not going to be any revenue tomorrow, in the near future anyway. We'll talk a little bit about that when we can expect things to normalize. And so we have this, all of a sudden, we're 2 months behind and we didn't even know it was coming. So we have to look at our expenses differently. And one of the ways that, it's easy to think about them is there's fixed expenses and there's variable expenses. So variable expenses are supply and labs and things like that. The busier you are, the more they go up. The less busy you are, the more they go down. So the variable expenses are really going to take care of themselves. The fixed expenses are the ones that we are, kind of stuck with, and we think of them all as being fixed. And I always think of our employees as being fixed expenses, because I don't want to furlough anybody. I don't want to lay anybody off. I don't want to fire anybody, right? I want to keep my team intact, because without a team, a dental office is nothing.
Right.
Uh, and so we're not going to talk about the team today because there's legislation being discussed absolutely today,
Right.
still being fought over. That's going to make a big difference on our advice moving forward with employees and how we deal with employees. So by the end of the week, we're going to have a better picture of that. We have to have an absolutely clear picture before April 2nd, which is when the two bills passed last week will become effective. So we've got to have answers on what we're going to do. So we'll talk later about the strategy for those things. But what I want to talk about today is the other fixed expenses, right? And so lenders, vendors, and landlords. And we think of all those as being very fixed expenses, but frankly, they aren't. They're more variable than you think, especially in a time of really crisis, financial crisis like it is right now.
So you're saying that obviously I have to pay a rent every month. I have to pay a certain amount of some certain vendors, which I have, I can't survive without. If I have a cloud-based practice management system, I have a subscription. I can't really turn that off. And then obviously I have bank loans to deal with. I got a debt service, and so you're saying that we should have a strategy around that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These may be more flexible in this very unusual time than they have ever been in the past. And so when we look at loans, right? So we have a loan on our practice or we have a loan on our building. If we don't pay that loan, what does the bank do?
Well, they can foreclose
They
on
can
us.
foreclose, but now they've got a practice or now they've got a building that is not generating any revenue for them. So after the real estate crisis in the 2000s, right, the banks ended up with all of these houses. Many of them were vandalized. They ended up selling them for pennies on the dollar. They ended up having a lot of carrying costs and a lot of transaction costs. And after that, them scratching their heads, figuring we would have been better just to leave people in their homes, not paying until they could pay again. And so I think that same thing, I think the banks understand that because of what they went through. And I think there is some flexibility, particularly with businesses that are strong. Businesses that are on the edge already may have less flexibility. But it certainly makes sense to talk to your landlords, talk to your lenders, and talk to your vendors to see, what can be done to postpone payments or make other arrangements. So they may be more flexible than you think and more flexible than they normally would be.
Have you seen this work with some of your clients? Are they calling?
Absolutely. So I can give you some idea of how to approach this.
Okay.
So the approach that I would take with lenders is I would call them. Don't just not pay, call them and
Right.
say, hey, I'd like 90 days with no payments, no interest, and no penalties. Now, you may not get 90 days, but I would ask for 90 days. And I've talked to, in the last 7 days, I've talked to at least 5 bankers, all of whom have banks that are making arrangements with their clients because they understand that this is a very unique time. Now, they are in a unique position because they can borrow money for 0 interest, right?
Correct.
They can borrow money to cover your payments.
Correct.
And so they're only down their operating costs. So, but they've understood that, foreclosing on a bunch of things is not really going to help them very much. And you foreclose on a dental practice, now what are you going to do? Now the dentist is gone, the patients are going to be gone. So really, you're in a pretty good negotiating position. And not that you don't want to be sensitive on a personal level, on a human level with the bankers because, they're in a tough bind just like all of us.
Right.
But I think you certainly can have that conversation. I think you'll be surprised how much flexibility there is.
Well, what about credit card companies?
I would do exactly the same thing. I would ask for the same thing, 90 days, no interest, no payments, and no penalties. Now, I can tell you, you're unlikely to get that from anybody, but it's a good place to start the negotiation. And because I think it's reasonable. We have had clients who have gotten that from lenders, not from credit card companies, but we have gotten that from lenders. And I would ask the same thing of landlords. Now, landlords are maybe the most variable of anybody because there are different situations for landlords, right? So in our own practices, we have one landlord that he owns the building, and that's what he's living off of. You know,
Okay.
that's his income. And so he is not going to give us 90 days
Right.
of no payments, because that means no 90 days of income for him, and he's not going to do it. But he did come part of the way with us, right? So he did come to half payments over that period of time,
Good.
which is extremely helpful, conserves cash. So the other kind of lender that you have is the more kind of corporate real estate investor type, REIT type real estate owner. And for them, they have a lot of debt on the property. So they're going to their bank and saying, hey, I need 90 days. So if they get 90 days, they can give 90 days. And again, they may give you some subset of that, but it's just worth asking, because they're going to be more flexible than you think.
And sometimes a deferral is okay too, right? You're just postponing, because when
Absolutely.
things go back, as you know, and that this segues us right into what happens when we come back, right? You're going to have plenty of patience, and what do you think? Like, what do you think when this is we're through this stuff, and maybe it'll take us a few months to get through it.
Yeah.
What do you? And obviously, we're going to have the stimulus. We're going to have the SBA potentially helping dental practices with loans or grants, or depending on whatever gets passed.
Exactly right.
But as far as dentistry goes, what is your outlook for it?
So it's going to be interesting to watch, because the disease progression, the disease concentration varies dramatically across the United States. And so I think the feeling of having one standard or one recommendation for the entire country isn't going to make sense as we get a little farther into this. I
Correct.
think in places of the country, you're going to see the disease kind of burn out and decrease. Now, remember in Wuhan, China, where it started, from the start of the acceleration of the disease to the end of the disease, where we almost got down to zero, was about 8 weeks, right? So in this country, that means that we should be peaking here relatively soon. You're not going to hear that from
The
the
media.
government. You're not going to hear that from the media for two reasons. Number one, the media likes to sensationalize things, and they get eyeballs when they have times when there's a lot of crisis and a lot of fear. The government, and both of them, are really trying to help people take social distancing more seriously. And so they're getting statistics that are as scary as possible, so that they can influence people to use social distancing, which is certainly helpful in reducing the contagion. So in places like New York City, which it has more deaths, that one city has more deaths than the rest of the country combined. That's going
Right.
to be a very unique recovery. It's going to be months there. But there are other places where this probably is going to burn out as we get into warmer weather, and places where it just hasn't taken off like it has in other places. I
Right.
think we'll be over relatively quickly. So we might be looking at another 6 weeks, something like that. Now, the ADA's recommendation was for a certain period of time. I think we're going to go beyond that, probably everywhere. But the ADA suggested people use their professional judgment, and if you see in your area, if we get past that period of time, you see that the cases aren't expanding, if there's no community spread, particularly, it might be reasonable to begin practicing again.
And the patients are going to come back. I mean, if you need dental work today, you're going to need dental work 4 weeks from now, right?
Exactly right. And 2008, 2009, remember, there was a bunch of money pumped into the economy, but it wasn't pumped into consumers' hands, right?
Right.
This one, the plan is pumping it directly into consumers' hands, right? Which is going to have a completely different effect afterwards. So people are going to have time off. They're going to have money in their pocket. They're going to have their dental needs. I think that we're going to come out, for those that plan properly, right? So there's strategies depending on where we are on this dip. There's different strategies that you're going to use. So people that strategize properly and are prepared, and that's what you and I are going to do with these recordings, is help people prepare, help people walk through those strategies so that they're prepared to come out of the chute going, a million miles an hour.
It really does. I mean, talking to you makes me feel. I look better already. Just the positivity coming from your talk. makes me feel that, because sometimes they do get bogged down.
Yeah.
And it's natural, especially if you have the TV on. I don't have it on.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. The state of Washington did not have one new case yesterday,
Yep.
which
Yep.
is that's the state that was the first one.
Yep.
So in summary, really, we've got to think about burn rate, understand what that is today. We got to look at fixed versus variable expenses. And as you said correctly, there are certain fixed expenses that you think may not be negotiable and not variable, could be. And you gave some good examples of how do you talk to your landlords. Either it's a reduction in rent, a 90-day deferral, whatever that might be. So they will want to help you because they understand that you're not just asking because you want to save money. It's because the crisis is real.
It's not that your business has a fault, right? The business is good. External circumstance made it go down. And so we saw this with Katrina. We saw this with Sandy, where practices were closed down for a period of time. They came back, right? They came back. It was a bump in the road, unpleasant and difficult, but they came back and became better than ever. And I think that's what we're going to see here, given some time. That $4 trillion of cash being injected into consumers' hand, not all that's going to go in consumers' hand, but a lot of it is going to have a world of difference on how this affects small businesses and dentistry in particular.
In the meantime, you just got to be responsible with your, cutting the burn rate. Make sure your team, and we'll have another little webinar on how to get your team. You can't be irresponsible with them. The communication you have with them right now is critical, because they're gonna. They need the help, and they will understand you if you can communicate better with them. And I'm sure you have a whole segment on that. Dr. John, it's always an honor to speak with you, meet with you in person, webinar, whatever it is. I think you're doing a great service with your daily 20-minute. How do people get to your 20-minute briefings every day?
So the Team Training Institute does a 20-minute briefing at 4:00 Eastern on Facebook Live. So go ahead and like or friend or whatever it is, the Team Training Institute on Facebook, and the previous ones are up there. You can take a look at those. But every day we go over 3 tips of what to be doing right now. We go over what the latest science is on the disease, and we go over the latest on what's happening within the government. So some days they're shorter or longer than others, because some days there's more to update. So it'll be a helpful tool for everybody to stay on top of it. And then we're going to get more specific on this with just really short, sharp tips of right now, do this, so that everybody stays busy, everybody is productive, everybody are making the best of what is certainly a difficult situation.
If you need some resources about this, Dr. John has an amazing website, the Team Training Institute. The numbers are on the screen and the website as well. Check them out. There's new updates every single day. They've done an immense job at actually looking at data across different websites. Contact him. He will get back to you and give you and guide you at least in the right direction. So thank you so much for your time today. This is absolutely inspiring and positive, and that's what we need today more than anything else.
Well, thanks, Amol. Always great to be with you. Thanks to your great team putting everything together as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.